we're hard workers as a rule, and we forget how important it is to put our health first. And our health is really most important and is so tied to our productivity.
This is the Facility Management Innovator podcast, where we talk with FM industry leaders about workplace trends, challenges, and the future of the built environment. This show is brought to you by KRL Connections, providing information, consulting, and marketing expertise to help organizations deliver workplace innovation to the facility management community. Hey there, how's it going? And happy Halloween, everybody. It's Mike Petrusky here to welcome you to episode 9 of the FM Innovator podcast. It may be Halloween, but the only thing frightening about this show is how scary good it will be. And it's not because of me, of course, but it's all thanks to my special guest, workplace expert and best-selling author, Leigh Stringer. It was so cool to meet with Leigh, and it turned out because there was some construction going on at her office, we needed to record this interview at Leigh's house, which was really neat. Leigh and her family live in what was an old church building in Washington, D.C., and there is so much history there. She gave me a little tour, and I could go on and on about it, but it was just great. I had the chance to meet Leigh's husband, her 2 daughters, and their little puppy dog, and the setting was just really nice. We had pumpkins around us and decorations everywhere, so I decided, hey, we've got to release this episode on Halloween. And we talked about so much great stuff for almost an hour, and I just knew at the time this needs to be a 2-episode interview. So we've got part 1 for you today, and next week you'll hear the rest of my conversation with Leigh. Now, I don't want to take too much time away with this introduction, but I must say a big thank you to one person who was kind enough to leave us a review on iTunes last week. That's right, as promised, anyone who leaves us a review gets a mention on the podcast. So this is a shout out to Cameron in New York City. Thank you, sir, for listening, for your kind words, and for your support. You rock. And now, for my interview with Leigh, let's get started. I can't begin to express how thrilled I am to introduce you to my guest today, Leigh Stringer. Leigh and I met about a year ago at an IFMA event here in D.C. Then later we had a chance to grab a cup of coffee in Georgetown early one morning, and I had the privilege of asking Leigh a lot of questions. I was just blown away by Leigh's expertise and her insights about the workplace. So I cannot wait for you, the FM Innovator Nation, to hear from her today. Welcome, Leigh.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Leigh works for EYP, an architecture, engineering, and building technology firm right here in our nation's capital. She's a LEED AP, a workplace strategy expert and researcher. She is the author of not 1, but 2 best-selling books, The Green Workplace, and her new book, which we will talk about today, The Healthy Workplace, How to Improve the Well-Being of Your Employees and Boost Your Company's Bottom Line. Awesome stuff. Leigh's work has been covered by national media, including CNN, USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, and Good Morning America, and now we have what I'm sure is your most impressive achievement to date. You are on the Facility Management Innovator podcast.
It's awesome.
You are excited.
It's the best. I've reached a new pinnacle.
This is it. This doesn't get much better than this.
It doesn't, really.
Seriously, though, thanks and congratulations on the success of the book.
Thank you.
It must be really rewarding to see your hard work paying off and the content of the Healthy Workplaces being so well received and resonating with people.
Yeah. It's been exciting to kind of come through personally trying to figure out how to make myself more healthy, and then to be able to share all those learnings with other people and have them come back and say it really helped them out. I mean, nothing is more rewarding than that.
And we will learn more about you personally here in a moment.
All right.
But I've got to ask you before we get too far, what's it like to be a famous author? And have you been recognized yet in a public place, an airport? Has someone come running up to you asking for an autograph or a... Can I take a selfie with you, that type of thing? No,
nothing of the sort. I'm glad for a certain degree of anonymity in the airport still, and hope I keep that for a while anyway. No, it's been a really awesome thing to write and to find this kind of later in life. I mean, I've been an architect most of my life, and I did a lot of workplace strategy work. And about 5 years ago, with my first book, you mentioned The Green Workplace, just found a love of writing and passion about it that I never realized I had, and found my own voice. And so have been writing ever since. And the latest book is just kind of continuation of that, which is, it's so nice to find your personal passion and find more than one. You know, I obviously love workplace, but to be able to find another outlet And to find it later in life, I think, is a really great thing. So hopefully there'll be more personal passions down the line. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I'm right there with you with this podcasting
Yeah.
thing. I just have had the best time the last couple months recording these interviews and getting to know people better and hopefully bringing some value to the FM community. That's what we're all about here. So
absolutely.
Thanks for being a part of this. Now, to prepare for our interview today, I have spent the past couple of weeks listening to just about all the other podcasts you've been on, and I recommend the audience do the same. So much good stuff out there. Every host has their unique perspective, and the conversations go in a lot of different directions when talking about the book. So I feel like I already know you in a personal way, even though we've only met a couple times in real life. I did also read your book, of course, The Healthy Workplace, and it did not disappoint. I thought it was great. I didn't actually read it, though. I listened to the audiobook, and your voice sounds a lot different on tape. What's that all about?
This is a hired character actress, or maybe not character actress, but somebody who does audiobooks all the time. I have to say, it was a little bizarre to hear someone else reading the book because it sounds so different than the voice in my head.
Yeah.
When I was writing, it seemed like a weird disconnect, but she does a beautiful job.
She did a great job. Her name's Marguerite Gavin, by the way, and I thought she's a very acclaimed voiceover actress. And did you have any say in who they're going to pick, or is that all the publisher?
That's all the publisher.
Yeah.
That's all the
I was going to say, if I could go through and say, I'd like to have James Earl Jones read my voice for this podcast, please. The voice of Darth Vader.
You know what's so funny is I asked my publicist that. I'm like, hey, can I choose? I asked the same thing. Can I choose? And he's like, no, because everyone asked for James Earl Jones. I'm like, really?
That's
so
awesome.
It was hilarious. Yeah.
And that's my gratuitous Star Wars reference for this week's episode, by the way. Every week I throw in some Star Wars reference.
We can do that as much as you like.
So my goal today, what I hope to do, Leigh, is bring a unique and focused perspective to our audience of facility management professionals and industry partners that collaborate with them. So I want to talk about the business case for pursuing wellness strategies in the workplace. And I just know with you here, Leigh, we're going to have an awesome opportunity to bring some real value to our FM community. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
And what I love about the book is the way you've managed to mix in your personal story, as you mentioned, with all of the great research and the case studies. And the book's almost like a how-to or a manual or a guidebook. It's just the right mix of stories, anecdotes, and lists of practical ideas that can really help FMs and all of us make a change in our workplaces. And the book does start with you and your personal story. So I wanted to spend a little time to get to know you a little better, have the audience get to know you a little more personally, okay?
Sure.
On one of the podcasts, I learned that your typical day starts very early with your two kids, your two beautiful daughters. And you like to get out to maybe do a workout or a run. You probably have earbuds in. What are you listening to? Music or maybe other podcasts?
Other podcasts.
Really?
I listen to a lot of them. Tim Ferriss, yours, of course, is number one.
Of course, the FM Innovator podcast. Everybody's top choice. It's all over the iTunes charts, folks. You can't really beat it. So
that's right. I listen to Tim Ferriss. I listen to How I Built This, which is a new, really fun one about companies coming out of the ground, entrepreneurs, how they got their businesses running, and lots of things like that. Actually, In Our Time is a British podcast.
I've met some folks from Britain through IFMA, and you've had the opportunity to speak at IFMA's World Workplace and other conferences. What's that like? What do you most enjoy about speaking, and how do you want to be known in the FM world?
Well, I kind of wear two hats, and one is being somebody who really is focused on helping workplaces increase productivity and the performance of people, and whatever that means. But the other hat is really trying to share with our industry about how important health and well-being is for our practice and for us as individuals to really put that first. We put so many things first. We work our butts off. We're working 80 hours a week and crazy cycles, right? You got to get that building out. You got to meet the schedule, and it's just ruthless sometimes. And we forget, we're hard workers as a rule, and we forget how important it is to put our health first. And so we suffer, and our families suffer and our friends suffer because they want to see more of us. And our health is really most important and is so tied to our productivity. The times that I have slept in my life, the times that I've really paid attention to my diet and exercise and all that kind of stuff is when I was the most productive. And I think there's so much science that backs that up.
Well, specifically, you referenced an IFMA study and some of their research in your book. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, about a year ago, maybe a little longer, I did a study with IFMA looking at workplace changes, and it was kind of the next distributed work, I think was the original report that went out a few years ago, about 5 years ago, and we wanted to revisit that and say, all right, we're all distributed now, or how much more or less distributed are we, and what does that really mean? How does that impact the workforce, but also what sort of tricks and tools are our facility managers and others doing to ensure that they work? Because, we've all piloted some of these new, more flexible work environments and things like that, and they haven't been so successful. So change management and tools and technology, all that stuff wrapped in. A lot of folks are still new at this. They haven't even thought about trying it. We know it's catching a lot of ground and has for many years. But there are a lot of good lessons, so that's what this was about.
That's great. We have a lot of furniture dealers, space planners, workplace consultants in the FM community. They're probably listening to this podcast, at least I hope they are. And I wonder if we can talk a little bit about how these industry partners can use the concepts in your book to help FMs better manage their spaces.
Absolutely. So the book itself is broken into 3 parts, and the first part talks kind of about the history of work. We mentioned earlier the study with IFMA, and just this evolution that we've all experienced over the last 2 million years. It's a short chapter.
Yeah, it's a short chapter.
I talk a little bit about what does productivity mean, what does flow mean, how do we get our best insights. There's a lot of cool science around that, and then so that's part 1. The second big part is a lot of the practical tips you mentioned before around increasing movement and exercise, and how can the physical environment actually help us eat better during the day? We look at stress reduction, which is huge, how the physical space, can help us reduce stress, as well as sleep, and how space actually impacts our sleep, even our workspace. So that's pretty cool. And in the end, we talk a lot about the business case and creating a culture of health, and a lot of numbers and hard facts, which I think everybody really wants to see, especially out of a business book. And so I think if you're really want to jump in to get those tactical how-tos, I would focus on the chapters in the middle, which are full of research. And I was very careful to anything I recommended. I really tried to back up with the best research and talk directly to the researchers to make sure that it was well-founded and fact-checked and all the rest. So
and you said exciting. you would not be offended if people jumped around the book. You don't have to read it chapter and verse,
no.
Right?
Most of us are so busy. And so, just take a chunk and dive into something that's really meaningful to you personally. I think that's the best way.
I had so many takeaways from the book. I really enjoyed the discussion in the book about innovation centers and ways to promote collaboration, creativity, and flow. You mentioned flow. Didn't know what that was till I read your book, and I never knew there was a name for it. And I didn't know there was a name for urban friction, which was really cool.
Right.
And way before you mentioned all those, I thought of the last book I read or listened to, which was the Steve Jobs autobiography by Walter Isaacson. So obviously you've read that one too. I
haven't, but I know I know of all the work that Steve Jobs has done, and it's amazing. He did have some insights about space.
It seems like he was way ahead of his time in the sense that in that book, while he was a bit of a jerk at times, spoiler alert, Steve Jobs seemed to really recognize the value of collaborative spaces, and he really seemed to mirror a lot of the principles that you mentioned in the book. So I don't think that's coincidental. I think there's some evidence from his experience and what Apple created over the last 3 decades, right. What you were kind of putting into writing. So tell us what's important in the workplace to induce flow and productivity.
So one of the most interesting pieces of this research was reading a book by Jonah Lehrer, which is actually, I've since learned, is a little controversial, but he's a science writer for the New York Times and has wrote this book called Imagine. And he did some hardcore discovery talking to researchers in London at Goldsmiths University. And one of the things that he was trying to figure out, they were researching creativity and how people are creative. And he had them all, the researchers were basically plugging people's brains with all these, like the latest technology and measuring brain waves and frequency and all that kind of good stuff. And what they found, what they were trying to figure out, is they'd have people take tests and look at creativity tests. And when they were doing these creative exercises, the part in the brain that lit up like a forest fire was the upper right cortex of the brain. And it was interesting. And every once in a while it moved left, but it was really, really strongly in the upper right. And so he said that the researchers, after a while, really started to look at that more deeply and said, well, how does that trigger? How do we trigger that creative side? Everyone's trying to get that flow on, right? And that innovation and those insights. And the way that they figured that that part of the brain is triggered is by relaxation. And so they did a number of tests to prove this out. One of them was having a series of test subjects take a creative test and then, check their answers, and then have another group of people take a test and check their answers, except the second group was given a beer before they took the test.
The secret sauce.
And the beer folks did a lot better. But really, what they were saying, at the end of the day, it was any sort of relaxing thing that you can do. Go for a walk, take a bath, take a shower. Those best insights are when you're chilling. You're not sitting Cro-Magnon style over your laptop, focused intently on a task. That's actually the last position and or, frame of mind that you should be in to be creative. So this idea of, thinking about our workplace, creating more movement indoors and outdoors, creating things that restore us psychologically and get our brain off the constant email, the just, over and over kind of chronic stress that we're always in reaction mode that we're in all the time at the office or in the workplace, and finding a way to break away from that tends to be the best place for insight and creativity, all kinds of good stuff. So it's that was an waking call for me. I happen to be a big walker and runner.
Right.
And that's when I get the bath, occasionally the shower. I get this great insight.
Great
I gotta
ideas
write
in the
that down.
shower.
I should keep a notepad in there now.
I was going to invent one and go on Shark
see?
Tank, so don't steal my idea.
All right. I will not steal your thunder. Your secret's safe with me and all the listeners out there.
That's right. So I talk to a lot of facility management professionals, and there are so many different situations out there, as you know, depending on the size and the culture of the organization.
Right.
Some FMs are really plugged into the C-suite and have an understanding of the higher level strategies and decisions being made, while others would like to provide their perspectives about wellness initiatives and the utilization of space and some of these great strategies, but they may not know how to do so. How can FMs convince their bosses to make the necessary changes?
So there's so many business cases for why health is important and increases productivity. There's all these studies out there that show that companies that care about it have a higher stock price value, and than those that don't. There's a wonderful study that looked at the last 10 years of organizations that won the Corporate Health Achievement Award or the C. Everett Koop Award and compared them to the Dow Jones 500, and they performed it by like 3 times. If you're actually interested in increasing your stock portfolio, you should look at people who win some of these health and well-being awards, who are doing things about the physical space as well as other programs within their organization to improve health outcomes. And there's also, a 6-to-1 return on investment for investing in health programs. In general, come see me for any of this data. If you need it, I'm happy to provide it.
Your book goes a long way into mapping out the real business plan and the business case to prove that return on investment of initiating these programs. So.
And also recruiting. Sometimes just recruiting and retention is enough. We're working so hard to keep people and keep them employed and keep them, in our organization as long as we can, keep that talent or recruit the best talent. And there's this emerging group of people in our workforce who are insisting on it. They absolutely want to be able to bike to work, and where do I put my bike? And sure. I want to do planks at 4 p.m. You're telling me I can't plank in the middle of the hallway? Okay, maybe not. But some places are actually really seriously
widen those hallways.
In that.
Widen the hallways.
That's right. Encourage movement and providing gyms and places to actually work around, sit to stand desk, all those sorts of things. Really send a signal to your workforce that you care about them.
I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to get this message to our FM community and the facility managers out there, because they have their finger on the pulse of an organization. They know about the occupants. They know about their buildings. They know so much, and we just need to help them get that message to the right people to make and implement some of these changes.
Yeah, and one of the groups of people that I really recommend getting to know more are the health providers. There's this emerging position happening in organizations everywhere, the chief wellness officer or the wellness director.
Sure.
They're often HR, but often it's a separate group, right? These are people who are nutritionists or wellness people who are responsible, sometimes within the organization, sometimes a third-party provider that really understand the specific health issues that the population that you sit in are suffering from, chronic diseases, smoking, you name it. And knowing those folks, they've been, I feel like that industry, the wellness industry, is much older. They've been measuring people a lot longer and more aware of these health issues than the real estate industry. So I have learned so much from them, in terms of good research and good data. And I think as a partner, not just HR and IT, which we always try and include in our circle because it's so important for workplace, but I think these new wellness folks are a wealth of resources for you.
Well, I have learned a lot, and I continue. We've only scratched the surface here. I'm thinking, if it's okay with you, I'd like to continue this conversation and maybe make this a 2-part episode of the Facility Management Innovator podcast.
Let's do it.
So I appreciate your time, Leigh, today. Thanks for being here, and we will continue next week. Alrighty then, good times with Leigh Stringer, and there is much more where that came from, as they say. So be sure to get over to iTunes, subscribe to this podcast, and you will get a notification just as soon as part 2 is released next week. And while you're there, click those stars, give us a review, and let me know how we're doing. Won't you please? Thank you so much. Have a happy Halloween. Enjoy this fall season. As I mentioned, it is a beautiful time of year here in the Mid-Atlantic region. But wherever you are, be sure to be an FM innovator. Peace out. You've been listening to the Facility Management Innovator podcast. We hope you found this discussion beneficial as we work together to elevate the FM community by building partnerships that lead to innovative workplace solutions. For more information about facility management collaboration and marketing resources, visit krelconnections.com.